I'm Rob Kerr with Blue Granite, and today's blog posting is about extending Performance Point 2010 to Internet users. This really deals with supporting Kerberos delegation over the Internet or other types of complex distributed internal configurations for Internet users. This is something that isn't easily supported with the product out of the box, and this same technique can be extended to other BI technologies like reporting services, Excel services, and so on that also use Kerberos delegation for security. Okay, so what are our objectives with this configuration? Well, there's a few of them. The first one is we want to implement a really secure configuration to publish this BI application out to the internet, while also supporting our intranet users. We don't want to use a VPN because not everyone may have VPN access to our internal environment. Our internet user PCs, they might not be joined in the internal domain, so we want to make sure this can be used from just about any browser. And we do want to use Active Directory for user authentication for both internal and external users. And finally, we want to support Kerberos delegation of external users, which some of you might know is a double hop problem in a distributed environment where the database server isn't the same as the SharePoint server. We're going to have to deal with the double hop problem. This is hard to do when there's internet connected users, but this configuration is going to show you exactly how to take care of that. So here's the lab configuration. So we have an internet-based PC that's coming in from the outside, going through a hardware-based firewall, and that firewall is directing traffic for our target IP over to the Forefront TMG server. So TMG is the proxy server for everything else within the firewall. So it's essentially a second firewall inside the outer firewall. And what TMG is going to do is receive the traffic in from the outside PC and turn around and reverse proxy that over to SharePoint. So from SharePoint's point of view, all of the requests to it are internal. All the requests to it are HTTP, not SSL. TMG is really doing the SSL to HTTP translation in this case. But we do have the double hop problem because we can see that we're going from a PC to SharePoint, then from SharePoint to the backend OLAP environment, which is 2008 R2 SQL Server. Okay, so first, just a quick look at Dashboard Designer, and what we're doing here is we're actually going to be connecting to a cube, and we're going to use per user identity, which is going to be Kerberos delegation. We're going to test that, make sure that it actually works, and it connects okay. And then we're going to take a look over at the trace and see what's actually hitting the database. And we can see that the database is being hit with my user ID, which is Rob, against the database. So I know the user's ID is actually being delegated back to the database. And throughout the solution, that's what I want to see, because I want to delegate the end user's credentials to the database, not using the SharePoint credentials or other application pool identities against the data. So the first thing we'll do is actually test this solution out, and we can see that we're browsing to an internal server name SP1. That's SharePoint server's name on the internal intranet. And within the performance point content, we have a bunch of stuff. One of those is a dashboard. So there's this dashboard out here called PDW2. It's just a test, and we're going to go and look at it here within the browser. So we'll click on the page, and what we should see coming up is a dashboard coming up. It's very simple, it's just for demonstration purposes, but we do have some data here. We can move around with a filter and change the data dynamically, and then we can see that data is going to update. Okay, we want to make sure this is actually going to work, so we're going to look at that trace again and make sure that when we hit the dashboard from SharePoint, that the same thing is happening on the back end. That user's credential is coming through SharePoint back to the database and is hitting the OLAP database in the back end. And we can see that NT username column has my name in it. It doesn't have the name of a service account or network service or anonymous or anything like that. That's my name, so I know that delegation is happening from the internal side. So I'm browsing to SP1, and I'm getting delegation just like I want. Okay, the next thing that we have to do is make the magic happen. So we're going to configure TMG to bring in the SharePoint site. Now there is a wizard where most of this heavy lifting is done, but we're just going to look at this rule set and see how it works to see how this traffic is going to come in from the internet and make it into our internal site. So let's take a look at this thing. So we have our SharePoint.robker.com properties, and this is our rule. And what it's going to do is the action is allow traffic, and then on the From tab, from anywhere. So this will work, whether it's internet or intranet. And we're going to publish that to the SP1 site. So we're publishing a SharePoint's external URL to an internal URL, and the requests are going to appear to come from the TMG computer. And if we look at the traffic tab, we're going to allow only HTTPS to come in. And TMG has the concept of this listener, so the listener configuration really does most of the work. And we've got this configured to accept traffic from any network, so we could just be external, but we'll do any. And we're going to enable SSL on port 443. And this, we get a little warning. This requires a certificate, which we already have installed on TMG. And so this is the certificate that we're going to use. So it's SharePoint certificate really, but it's installed on the reverse proxy server, and the TMG will be decrypting the traffic for us. And then what this page is really important. So it's going to tell us that the authentication is going to be on a form that's going to then turn around and use Windows authentication. So that's why SharePoint's going to see this as traffic coming from the inside, because TMG is really making it look like this external user is an internal user. Just a little housekeeping. We're going to actually trace the incoming traffic from the outside and look at it. And we know I checked in advance, and the external IP address out on the Sprint network for my outside users is this one. And so we're going to update a rule that just shows us all the traffic that's coming in from that IP address to the inside. So now we'll flip over and take a look at the external client and try to hit the site from the outside and see what happens. Okay, so now we're kind of flipped over to another computer, and this is connected to the internet by Sprint through a cell card that gets us off of the internal network, so it's a better test. And as you see here in the browser, we're actually browsing to an https:// site to get to this server. And the first thing we're going to do is hit the Forefront TMG site, and it's going to have us authenticate ourselves, and it'll take this and authenticate against AD, and then from there it'll reverse proxy everything else we do. So right away we get into the same site, and in this, notice that we're using the external URL on HTTPS here, and just kind of to browse in. And this technique isn't limited just to a BI application. This could be just anything that's on this site. So we can browse in and find some content, maybe a picture of some penguins, and take a look at that and make sure it works, and see what our experience looks like on SharePoint coming through this external site. Okay, so let's take a look at our dashboard. So if we click on this dashboard, we're really following the same path that we did internally. We're just coming from a different direction, and we'll go in and hit this page. Now, the significance is that obviously we can't do direct delegation from the internet, but because the reverse proxy is there, the delegation still happens. So if we go and drill down and look and switch from one region to another, we get pretty much the same experience, same performance. Everything from the end user is the same, even though what's happening in the middle is really quite different. So the next thing we'll do is turn around and look in the back end and just make sure that delegation is really happening as we expect. Okay, so let's take a look at that trace rule that we put on there, so we can see the traffic's coming in from the external client IP to the destination IP. So it's coming on port from protocol HTTPS, but then it's on the destination side, it's actually turning around and being sent to the internal SharePoint server on port 80. So all that decryption is done on the edge, and what's coming through the network is, in this case, unencrypted. Now, it could be encrypted if we wanted to, but we just configured it this way. But this log at least tells us that what we think is happening when we're on the outside edge is actually what is happening. So then we'll next take a look and just make sure that our user ID is getting delegated to the database, and at that point we'll have verified the configuration. Okay, so again to the database trace, and let's look as the external user hits this site, and we can see here's our query coming through, and again the user ID is mine, so I know that that my user credential is being delegated from the Edge TMG server back into the database, which is exactly what we want to happen. Okay, we're done. We've securely published our Performance Point BI solution to the internet. We didn't require a VPN to do it. Our internet user PCs didn't have to be in the same domain, or for that matter, any of the domains that are within our environment. We did use Active Directory for user authentication for external users as well as internal, and we supported Kerberos double hops or Kerberos delegation of credentials back to our backend database servers. I hope that was informative. If so, head on over to my blog at blog.robker.com, where you'll find more information and videos like this one.